In this video, I'm going to break down what an API is and how it really works. We will use n8n to connect to CoinGecko, which is a cryptocurrency platform, pull live prices using its API, and then send it to Telegram. So if you come to n8n workflow and you say execute this workflow, it's going to pull that live price and it's going to show you BTC is this, ETH is this, USDT is this. It's going to get those prices and it's going to send it to you on Telegram. So let us start by asking, what is an API? Basically, an application programming interface, which is the full name for the acronym API, is a set of rules that allows applications to talk to each other and exchange data. Whenever you are in n8n and you're building workflows, usually you're stringing applications together and you're allowing them to exchange data. You are able to achieve this using APIs. In order for you to really understand it, it helps for you to think of it as a restaurant. So imagine Jack wants to go to a restaurant, right? The first thing he does is he goes to the website, and the website in this case is more like the API documentation, but Jack goes to the restaurant's website and creates a reservation ticket. Now, this reservation ticket is more like your API key, right? The website, we have details like what is the address of the restaurant, what menu is available, how Jack is going to get to that place, or things related to that restaurant. So on the scheduled day that Jack has selected to visit the restaurant, he goes to the restaurant, presents his reservation ticket, right? So Jack shows his ticket. That ticket is going to grant access to what Jack has authority to do in that restaurant. For example, that ticket will allow Jack to come into that restaurant. Maybe Jack reserved his seat for 2 or for 5, depending on the number for that ticket. But that ticket will not allow Jack go to the kitchen and try to prepare something, right? So there are permissions around what Jack is allowed to do and what Jack is not allowed to do. So Jack comes into the restaurant. Jack is presented with a menu. This menu already exists, right? So they're not generating a new menu for Jack. This is a menu that already exists. So Jack browses through the menu, filters the menu, decides on what he wants, then he sends that information to the waiter. Now, on behalf of Jack, the waiter takes the content of what Jack has requested to the kitchen. So the kitchen prepares the meal. Remember that Jack's meal did not exist before, right? So the kitchen is now generating a new meal for Jack. Now, after the meal has been prepared, the kitchen sends that information through the waiter back to Jack. So in this particular case, the waiter is more like what is managing the connection between Jack and the kitchen, which is where Jack meal is being created. There are various components to an API request. The very first one, which you're going to be seeing over and over again, is the method. Now, the method is used to determine what action you can perform. And there are different methods. You can have the get method, you have the post, you have the put, the delete. The get method is used to retrieve data. So that means the data already exists. You are just retrieving it. So when Jack is retrieving details from the menu, what he's basically doing is that he's doing a get method to retrieve that data because the menu basically already exists. For post, you are creating new data. So when Jack places that order to the kitchen for the meal to be prepared, that meal did not exist before. So Jack's order is what is triggering the creation of that meal for Jack. So that's basically an analogy for the post request. Then you have the put, which is used to update data. Let's say you want to change an update in what you just ordered. You have the delete, which means you want to cancel your order, right? So something like that. In our use case, we're going to be making an example using the get request. Now, the next component that is very important is the endpoint, which is like the location of the API or like the location of the restaurant, right? And it's usually a combination of URL and path. So in this particular case, if you see this api.tably.com, this is the endpoint plus -search, which is usually the path. We are going to explain this as time goes on. Now, you also have the header, which allows you to provide more information. So usually you're able to provide like your authorization, which is like the ticket, the authentication token that you have to access the API. Then usually you provide the content type to say, oh, the content type of whatever request I'm going to be sending is going to be JSON. Now, the next one that you're going to be seeing is what you call the body parameters, which is usually the content of the request. This is usually used in post requests, right? So when you're making a post, the body of that post is usually the body parameter. So let's say you go to ChatGPT, for example, and you type in who is Leo Messi. Now, ChatGPT is going to create a post request to the OpenAI LLM and return a response to you. So that post request contains this body parameter, which is who is Leo Messi, and that response then comes back to you. So body parameters usually use in post request. Query parameters, these are similar to filters, right? They're as good as filters, and they are usually used in get request. So let's go back to the restaurant, right? When Jack is looking through the menu, and maybe out of the menu, maybe there are like 10 items in the menu, and Jack decides to select two, maybe one starter and one main dish. What Jack is doing is Jack is filtering from the menu, right? Remember, when Jack is he's looking at the menu, he's basically doing a get request. So when he's filtering to say, oh, I want this for starter, I want this for the main dish, I want this for dessert, what Jack is basically doing is a get request with a filter, and that filter is usually part of the query parameters. Now, whenever you initiate an action via an API, you usually get a response. So the response is usually your reply from the server. Another very important thing in API requests is what you call your response codes, your HTTP response codes or API response codes, because API requests are more, they are under HTTP really. So you're going to see different codes, and those codes basically signify, they try to tell you if you're in the wrong direction or if you're in the right direction. So whenever you see a code starting with 2xx, right, it means that whatever you're doing was successful. So for example, if you see 200, it means also okay. If you see 201, it means whatever you posted has been created. Then when you see something like 4xx, it means it's client error. That means you're doing something bad, right? So maybe 400, you're doing a bad request. 401, you're unauthorized, so maybe your authentication token is wrong, right? You need to get the right keys or right API keys. And you see 403 means maybe you're trying to access what you are not permitted to access, so that's forbidden. Now, if you see 5xx, any error that starts with 5, it means that the problem is not from you, it's from the server. So probably there is 500 says is internal server error, or 503 means that service is unavailable. Now, you're going to get, there are a variety of response codes, but these are the ones you're going to most likely be encountering on a day-to-day basis when you're building your automation. So let's jump into n8n and see this in action. So the first thing we are going to do here, so let's come back to this place and create a new workflow. And the first workflow, let's have our trigger, right? Now, the next one is the HTTP node. Now, the HTTP node allows you to make a HTTP connection to whatever data you want to connect to. So I have my trigger node and I have the HTTP request node. So if I open this, I want to be able to connect to CoinGecko. So the first thing I need to do is go to CoinGecko website, navigate to their API documentation. Now, this is the API documentation for CoinGecko. You can see the API reference for Pro. If you're in the Pro, if you're a paid subscriber, you get to be able to access the Pro part of this API. But for this use case or for this demo, we are using the demo API reference. So under the API reference, you're going to see the different documentation that allows you to be able to connect to CoinGecko and be able to pull whatever information you want to do. So if I come under coins, for example, under CoinGecko demo API, I come to coins, you can see different endpoints that are listed here. So let's go to coins list with market data. So if I click on this, it's going to open up the page. It says this endpoint allows you to query all the supported coins with price, market cap, volume, and market related data. And you can see the paths, right? So first of all, you have the endpoint and you have the path, which is /coins/markets. And you can see this get method. This is the method I talked about. This is the get method, and that's what we are going to be using to pull that information. Usually when you come to an API reference documentation, right, you're going to see something like this that tells you if you want to make a COI request, this is the data this is how your data should be formatted. So if I click on this, it's going to tell me if you're going to be connecting using Python or JavaScript or Java or PHP, it's basically going to tell you this is how your data should be formatted. So in this particular case, we are using COIL. So I will select COIL. It's telling me that this is how it expects my data to be formatted. So I can copy this, come back to n8n, right? If you come to n8n, there's actually an import coil that is here. So if I click on import coil, I paste this data here, and I click on import, it will automatically fill this out for me. You can see the method here is get, and there are other methods. You can see the delete, you can see the post, you can see the put that we talked about earlier, right? But in this particular case, we are using the get. Remember the URL. The URL is like, this is the endpoint. http coingecko.com API v3. So this is like the endpoint. Now, if you go back to that documentation, this is the endpoint, right, that you are connecting to. Why this is the path, or you can just call this the endpoint, right, because that's actually the endpoint. Every other thing is a path. So, but in this particular one, we are looking at the /coins/markets. So that is how we have that data here, /coins/market. Now, the authentication is not actually none because the header parameters, the authentication is part of the header parameters. So you can see under the header parameters, you can have the name and you have the API key. So because you're adding the header parameters here, you choose authentication none. Do not use it like this in production because it means that your API key can be seen in clear text. Now you have the header parameters, you have the name, you have this is the name of the header parameter, which is your authentication, your authorization token, and it expects your API key. So if you don't already have an account with CoinGecko, go ahead and create an account with CoinGecko. It will also allow you to be able to add an API key. So again, when you have an API key, be sure to protect your API key because anybody that has access to your API key can do every action you are able to perform using your API key. So for this, I'm going to delete this after, so there's nothing to worry about. So if I come back to this place, I paste this here, that's the value, which is my API key. Now let's go back to the documentation. Now, if you come to this documentation, it tells you for authorization, you need the API key, right? Which is what we've already included in the header. And the API key must be named this. In some cases, some APIs, what you're going to see authorization here. And you can see here, it is required. And of course, like we said, it is a header parameter. So this is a header and it's also a string. That explains why we, under header, specify headers, we put the name, which is the name that was listed there, and we put the value of the API key there. Now, if I execute this workflow, what's going to happen? It's going to tell you your request is invalid. And if I open this up, you're going to see it's giving you error code 422. And if you look at the full message, it will tell you missing parameter VS currency. That means it's missing a parameter. That's why it's not able to retrieve that data. So if I come back to this place, I'll look for what parameter is required. Here, authorization is required. Then under query parameters, it is expecting VS currency is also required. Now you can see every other thing, ID, name, symbols, all these are like they are optional. If it is required, it's going to tell you it is required for that endpoint to work or for that query to work. If you don't see required, it basically means it's optional. Some websites will put optional for you there, but for this, there is no option. There is no optional parameter. But you can see here, this is required. The default is USD and is a string value. So I need to create a query parameter. Remember when we said that when you're doing your GET request, you used in GET request, your query parameters are a sort of filter. So if I come back to this place, the parameter is VS currency. I copy this VS currency, come back to my n8n workflow, and I look for, you can see here, send query parameters. So if I open up this place, it will allow me to say, okay, this is the name, VS currency, and the value should be what? Now, if I go back to this place, it said the default is USD. So we can use the default and say USD. Right, so this time around, I now have my query parameter. Remember, this is a GET request. I have my header parameter that has the authorization token. This is not a post request, so I'm not sending a body parameter. So if I execute this request this time around, you can see Bitcoin, Ethereum, and you can see Tether, you can see Ripple. So one of the things you can actually do is to filter it, just make it a bit better. So I can create a set node here to say schema. I can add to say, okay, what is the symbol? I can say symbol. I can say BTC, that's the value. I can decide to also extract, let's say, price. So here, the current price is this. I can decide to say, okay, what else should I extract from here? Let's extract the all-time high. The all-time high, we can extract that and put it here. So I'm extracting the symbol, which is BTC. I'm extracting the price, and I'm extracting the all-time high value. If I execute this, you're going to see for each of them, it has filtered it out. Now, another thing I can do, let me move this a little bit. Another thing I can do, because this is 100 items, I can just limit it. I can add the limits and just say, okay, just give me the top 5, right? So that it just limits it to just 5 items. You can see these are the 5 ones that it extracted. The next thing I can do is, because when it does a limit, the values came in as different values. So I want to be able to put them together. So I will say all items into one data. You can see these are 5 items, but they are separate, right? So if I execute this, it's going to make it one data. Instead of 5 different items, it's now going to be one. You can see it has taken those 5 items and it has made it one. Now, the next thing I then need to do is I want to be able to send this information to myself on Telegram. And I click on this, remove this. I'm able to see, send a text message. So this is what I actually need. Bring this back here. So send a text message, credentials to connect. I'm going to select my Telegram credentials. If you don't already know how to connect your n8n to Telegram, I will leave a link in the description on a video I did on how to do that. So you'll be able to basically understand what I did here. Now the resources message, the operation is chat message. The chat ID, again, if you go through that video, you will understand how this chat ID is obtained. The next important thing is what message you want it to send. So basically what I want it to be able to send, to say coin price, right? And let's change this to expression. So that coin price, I want it to be able to say, okay, the symbol, then put a colon there and add price. The same thing, I will just do that for ETH2. Select it and add a price. So you can just keep going on and on, do that for USDT. Since there are 5 of them, just quickly finish that. Now that is complete, you can see 0 to 4. We have 0 to 4 here. So if I execute this and open up Telegram, you can see it has sent us that information on Telegram. Now another thing, you can remove this message was sent automatically with n8n. So you can come here and say append n8n attribution. You can remove this, right? So that the next time it sends that message, you can see it's just going to, there's a space here, so you can just come back and make sure that you can eliminate that space here. So the workflow is ready. We can execute this workflow. So let's look at, let's refresh this and look at BTC price. BTC price is 113129. So let's execute this workflow and see, you can see 113125. There's a bit of a lag there, but you get the point. In cryptocurrency, the price is constantly changing. So it's able to extract that information and it's going to send it to you on Telegram. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for watching. And if you have any question or you have any automation you want me to talk about, please leave it in the comment section. Kindly like this video, subscribe so that YouTube can send this to others that may benefit from it. Thank you very much once more and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.